big day for you. Congrats on the book.
Thank you, Adam. Super excited.
Always a big accomplishment. And I was happy to endorse it. It's a great read. There's so many good insights in there. Just love to spend a few minutes just talking about the book. And why don't we start with kind of the title and what does it mean?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, the title itself comes from a billboard that Twilio has been running on the 101 freeway here in California for the last 6 years. And really, the title speaks to this idea that companies should really be looking to their developers, their technical talent, to help them build the business as partners in executing amazing digital strategies here in the digital economy. And that sounds completely obvious, but the thing is, what I find is that it's not often the case that companies and executives and leaders think of their technical talent as creative problem solvers, as company builders, right along with the various business people that companies hire. Because so often, people think of developers as just technical minds, like people who write code, people who like algorithms and quadratic equations. But really, I've met so many developers through the years who are incredibly creative, who are really good at problem solving, and who love understanding business and are actually good at thinking about customer problems and business problems and applying their technical knowledge to those domains. And the weird thing is that we live in this world today where the companies who build the best software, who are able to listen to their customers and understand their customers' need, and then build software that creates a great customer experience or amazing digital products, well, those are the companies who tend to win because customers reward those companies with their business when their product is better or the customer experience is better. And so much of that is digital now. And so Ask Your Developer is really a mindset. It's a playbook that helps companies think about, how do I bring in all that technical talent that we've hired that, by the way, is hard to find. And if you don't figure out how to engage their full minds, like maybe they'll go find another company or get another job. And so it helps you attract and retain great talent, but then also make sure that you're getting the most out of all that amazing talent that companies have.
Right. And it does seem to be such a core part of the narrative of company disruption. I mean, you see this with big companies and Upper West Side of Manhattan, we got a pandemic puppy along with everybody else. We went to the usual vet, which was kind of really difficult to deal with. And then we found this other one where it was like all app based and it was a completely different experience. So it does seem to be this idea of like, bring the developers into the creative process so that they are there to design it from the start rather than having the people in the ivory tower set the strategy, right?
Exactly. It used to be, 15, 20 years ago, companies thought of IT as it was a cost center, because it was like laptops and, maybe your financials systems. And so customers didn't care about any of that stuff. And so it was a cost center. You tended to outsource it. And a funny thing happened over the last 15 years. It went from being this thing that customers didn't know about or care about in a cost center to now with mobile and the web. Digital is actually the main experience that a lot of customers have from almost every kind of company. And so back in the day, companies would regularly make these build versus buy decisions. Oh, hey, do we build this or do we just buy it from a vendor? And, oftentimes you would just buy a solution from a vendor because you'd say, oh, this isn't strategic, it's not a core competency, et cetera. Well, nowadays, it's the companies who actually build software, who can listen to customers, like the vet, who can deploy the best software to make it a great experience for you to schedule, to show up, to follow up, whatever it is. Well, those are the companies that tend to delight their customers and therefore win the hearts, minds, and wallets of those customers. And so nowadays, I don't think the answer is really build versus buy. It's really become build versus die, as every industry starts to undergo this Darwinian evolution where the companies who understand their customers can listen to what their customers need and go build those things, well, they tend to win. And so this build versus die evolution of every industry is kind of what Mark Andreessen predicted with software is eating the world. That is playing out now in real time. And I think that the companies who are able to build the best software are going to win. And there's a lot of talk, this isn't a new concept. A lot of people have talked about digital transformation and all of this, but the funny thing about all that talk, so little of it has been about the actual people with hands on keyboards who are making this happen, the software developers. And so what Ask Your Developer aims to do is to really create this parlance between the more traditionally business-minded folks and the technical folks build a bridge between the two because their goals are basically the same. Business people and developers, what do they all want? They want to build amazing digital products and experiences. They want to delight customers. They want millions or billions of people to be using those products, and they want those products to make money. It's like, hey, we're all aligned here. We've got the same goals. Let's start talking the same language and let's start collaborating to actually better unlock those goals.
Right. And yet, so many organizations, Department of Stating the Obvious, are built on kind of tribal behavior, sort of this subgroup, that subgroup. And, I think a lot of big companies yeah, we want to bring the developers, the coders into the engine room, but do they speak our language? How do we do that? What's your advice to people?
Well, I think the very first thing is to understand that code is creative and developers are creative problem solvers. And so the reason why this is important is that so many businesses think of the divisions okay, you've got product managers or other business people who their job is to go out and talk to the customers and figure out the requirements for the product and document it very specifically in a product requirements document or something like that, and then throw it over the wall to the developers, where the developers apply their creative problem solving to decide, what algorithm to use or how to arrange the text boxes on the screen. And so I call that sharing a solution with the developers, i.e. a business person has fully spec'd it out and they share the solution they want built. They share that with their technical teams. But the best companies, what I've found is that instead of sharing solutions, they share problems. They go to those developers, those technical teams, and instead of saying, here's the solution I want you to build, they say, here's the business problem we need to solve. Here's the customer problem we need to solve. One of my favorite examples from the book was actually from Domino's Pizza. So I don't know if you know Domino's. Domino's is this sleeper success story. Their stock over the past decade has outperformed many of the tech giants in terms of total return. It's an amazing story of a digital comeback and Domino's transformation into a digital company. And it really started when Patrick Doyle, the CEO, hired a new head of technology about a decade ago. And then that person started hiring a really great set of technical talent. And then one day, Patrick Doyle had this insight and he went to the team. He said, you know what? What if we could make it so that someone could order a pizza from a stoplight? Why? Because parents are oftentimes coming home from work. They haven't figured out dinner yet. And if they could, while they're sitting at the red light, within 20 seconds or whatever, order a pizza to their house, then they'd have dinner solved. And that sent the technical team off on years of work to figure out how to make it easier and faster for a customer to order a pizza, within 20 seconds. And that has led to so much of Domino's success and growth. And by the way, there were so many solutions that came out of that simple problem statement that I'm sure Patrick didn't even anticipate when he started. For example, the whole pizza tracker thing. Is the pizza going to get there before me or am I going to get there before the pizza? So many things came out of that one simple problem that he shared with his technical team that then has led to so much innovation and so much shareholder return for them, which is a pretty amazing story.
Right.
Nobody thinks of Domino's as a tech company, but they really are.
Exactly. And it does seem like the gap between companies that get it and those that don't is growing. I mean, just as a consumer, when we have the experience of, dealing with an app where it's this thing works the way it should, it's simple, it's intuitive. And then you go to, other companies and it all feels kind of like Frankenstein-y and bolted on and you're furrowing your brow, trying to figure it out.
Well, if you think about developers, they know the technology, they know the way things have been implemented at your company, they know the architecture, they know the things that have already been built. And so one of the interesting things is if you go to a developer with a solution, you say, hey, this thing must work like this and this and this, and you give them a specification, then they will dutifully do that. If you tell them that that's their job and you hand them a specification, and I'm sure many times the developer might be saying, well, that's not how I would have done it, but that's what the spec says. So, okay. And implement it. And oftentimes that may take a long time. They may say, okay, well, if I do it to the spec, I can do a work estimate here and say, oh, well, that's going to take us, 9 months to go write it the way the spec says. But if you were to go to the developer with the problem, say, hey, we're trying to solve this problem, they might have a much simpler, much more elegant way to get there, knowing everything they do about the technology, about how the architecture at the company works. And they may be able to say, like, hey, I actually have a better solution and it'll get us there in 2 weeks instead of 9 months. And so if you give developers the latitude to understand the problem domain, the technology, and the state of the system as it is today, oftentimes developers can come up with much more integrated, much more elegant, and much faster solutions. And again, that's really what everybody wants. There's no executive who wakes up in the morning saying, wow, I really wish we could write some bad software today. I really wish we could create a kludgier experience today. Nobody wakes up with that as the goal. It's just an outcropping of many of the ways in which we create companies, and we unintentionally tie developers' hands and say, okay, well, that's not your job. Your job is to just write what's on the page. And so I think Ask Your Developer also provides a way for companies to not just unlock that talent, but to build better software, to build it faster, and to create an intrinsic motivation in all the people working on these projects to do really great work, because they're bought in on the problem they're solving and the customer they're serving, as opposed to the specification they're trying to close out.
There's a bonus in your book of, as much as it's about software and developing, there's just so many great insights there about culture that are applicable to all companies. Twilio has been a rocket just as you've been scaling. What are the key insights for you, your advice to other businesses? Like, how do you stay small as you're getting bigger? Like, that's the universal challenge of any scaling company. So what are the top 2 or 3, Jeff, lessons?
Absolutely. I think the most important thing is focusing on small teams as your unit of execution. Because if you think about it, startups have a tremendous amount of drive. They have a lot of urgency, and pretty much everybody can hold the whole picture in their head, and they know how important the customer problems are. And there's just such an intrinsic motivation to go do great work because it's a small team, and there's a tremendous amount of urgency and a tremendous amount of ownership in what the team is building. But as companies grow, there's this tendency for people to get siloed. There's a department, we do this, you do that. There's walls that come up that separate people from the customer they're serving, as well as it's easy to start to feel like you're just a cog in a giant machine. You're like, well, I'm one of 200 developers on this project. So, no one will notice if I take the day off, probably, right? And so the key that I have found, and this goes back to my experience at Amazon, this is how Amazon operates, is to really continually grow your company by creating basically a system, a network of small teams. And so at Twilio, all of our work that we do is divided into teams of no bigger than 10 people. Because what we find is 10 people is the amount of people who can do a lot of work together, who can really operate as one team and can focus on a mission. And we define small teams as a customer that they're serving, a mission that they're there to accomplish, and metrics of how do we know if we're succeeding in that mission. And so with a customer, a mission, and metrics, a small team can sprint really fast to serve a customer. And that small team is going to act like a startup for a few reasons. One, everybody, it's a tight-knit team. You can't have a low performer hang out on a team of 10 people for a very long time without anybody noticing, right? Because it's such a small team. Everyone's got to do their part. Everyone's got to lift their part, and people will notice and care if somebody is not carrying their part of the load. The second thing is that whole team can really understand the full end-to-end of what they're doing. There's very little like, oh, well, someone far away made a stupid decision and we're just here to implement it. You're like, no, like all the decisions, if you create autonomy on that team, all the decisions are really known by that team. And, let's say the leader of that team had to make a decision. That's not some far off person that like, oh yeah, some, vice president of this or that decided, now we just have to go do it. It's like, no, my manager who I talk to regularly made this decision. Let me go talk to her and find out why this decision was made. And chances are that team actually got together and made the decision together in some ways. And so I think the accountability that you get from a small team, the sense of urgency that you get from that small team is really the essence of what a startup is. And so as a company grows, your job as a leader is to figure out, how do I continue to capture that urgency, that accountability? And small teams are a great way to do it.
Right. And now, we're almost a year into this pandemic that's created an additional leadership challenge. you know, what has been kind of the Jeff playbook on leading in this environment where if those small teams, that sense of connection is so important, yet we're all over Zoom now.
Yeah, well, you know, it can work. It can work over Zoom. It can work in an office. You know, one of the nice things about small teams, as we start to navigate the, you know, the possibility of reopening offices at some point in 2021, it's our expectation that some employees and some teams will want to go back to an office. They actually really like going into the office building and being face to face with their teammates. Other people will actually prefer to work from home, and maybe they even moved somewhere where they say, actually, I'm pretty happy where I ended up, and I want to stay here. And then a bunch of other people say, you know what, I kind of want a hybrid. I want to come into the office 2-3 days a week and maybe work from home a few days a week and save on the commute. And those things are all valid ways. Like, I'm not going to say like any one of those is better than another. I think that people are finding new ways of working that work for them, and that's great. And one of the neat things about small teams is that they can reconfigure. So we can have a team over here who decides we're going to be the in-office team, and there's a team over there who says we're going to be the virtual team. And people who whose working style doesn't fit with that team, they say, okay, great, like I can just go switch teams, and I can find a team whose working style fits with mine. The other thing that's neat about small teams is it allows you to scale geographically. So a team, let's say they're virtual, they should probably be within 3 or 4 zip codes of each other, just so they have enough overlap in their working days to be able to collaborate, right? But then you can have other small teams who are halfway around the planet. And as long as they have a good way of interfacing with each other, and in a technical organization, that's oftentimes APIs, then they can each do their work fairly independently and be able to drive forward with, you know, serving the customer and building whatever they're building. But you don't have to take 1,000 people and say, okay, everybody, we all have to figure out one way or another way to work. You only have to do that at the level of like 8 to 10 people, which is a lot easier.
Yeah. 2 final questions, Jeff. You mentioned Domino's, but what's another like Jeff favorite story from the book you want to share that kind of captures this ask your developer mindset?
Thanks, Adam. You know, one of my favorite stories was from President Barack Obama. You're like, well, what did President Barack Obama have to do with developers? Well, actually a lot. So if you recall, you know, he passed the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, which itself was a Herculean feat to get that kind of thing through Congress and all that, only to see it almost fail because the website healthcare.gov was falling over when it opened up for registering people. And, you know, he was pretty, you know, mad that like having achieved his signature legislative accomplishment to see the technology, and there was like billions of dollars spent on this website with some, you know, huge contractor, that's the reason why healthcare for all could possibly fail. And so he came to Silicon Valley. And reason I know this is because my co-founder, Evan, was one of the people that Obama recruited. So Evan had recently left Twilio, and he got an email that said, hey, you know, Evan, what are you up to? And it came from someone at a whitehouse.gov email address. He said, will you come to a meeting next week? And Evan didn't really know what the meeting was about or who was going to be there, but he said, well, you know, sure, I'll come to a meeting with the White House. So he shows up at this hotel, and there's all this security, and you know, they do the background checks and all that. They take him up to the top suite of the hotel, and he's sitting around with 3 other, you know, Silicon Valley developers, and they see a helicopter fly by. It's Marine One. And about 5 minutes later, the door opens. Obama's standing in the door. And he says, your country needs you. We need to modernize the federal government. We need Silicon Valley-like thinking in so many parts of our federal government. And you have been nominated by your peers as some of the brightest and best in Silicon Valley. And I want you to come out to DC and be the founding members of the US Digital Service. Can you come serve your country? And I love that story, because if you want, you know, I hear from so many leaders who ask me, like, I know we need to be good at digital. I know we don't want developers. How do I recruit good developers? And it really starts from the top. Showing the commitment from the CEO and the senior leadership team of a company is really one of the key things to attract great talent, at least at the very beginning, like when you want to get the ball rolling, you know, recruiting your very first technical talent, your technical leader. Really showing that commitment from the top is important. And Obama demonstrates that so well. He also says the stakes are high. You know, your country needs you. We need to revolutionize how we build for the 21st century as a country, or else we're never going to succeed. And so the stakes are high. You've got the support from the commander in chief. What a great pitch to bring on great technical talent. And I think so many leaders could benefit from understanding how important their role is in telling technical talent how important it is. And that way they can recruit the best, and then also supporting those folks. And so that story of just showing that commitment and probably the best recruiting pitch I've ever heard. That's one of my favorite stories from the book. It was so fun to write that story.
Yeah, that is a great story. And I know the proceeds from the book are not going into the Jeff Lawson College Fund for your kids. Tell us about where they're going.
Absolutely. The proceeds from the book are going to support organizations who are bringing more people into the technical fields, into technology industry, and helping them become developers. In fact, there's 4 organizations to start who are receiving the proceeds from the book. NPower helps veterans learn to code and enter the technology field. Year Up helps young adults who want to enter the technology field from underrepresented backgrounds. Smash helps high school students from underrepresented backgrounds, Black, Latinx, and Native American folks who are in high school, help them enter the STEM fields. Most of those people go to college, the first in their families to attend college, and ultimately enter the technology field. And Black Girls Code, who has a mission to help 1 million girls get trained as developers by the year 2040. And so a bunch of amazing organizations who are helping to train the next generation of developers, but also make sure that the next generation of developers really represents our society generally.
That's great. Jeff, always enjoy our conversations, always learn a ton. Congrats on launch day and best of luck with the book.
Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate it.